Welcome to Positive Atheism English Channel. Today, I am going to continue the third part of the article, An Atheist Manifesto, written by the atheist Joseph Lewis. Freaks of all kinds exist in nature, from the utterly ridiculous to the terrifying monstrosities. This is proof of the lack of design in nature as far as man is concerned. When man comes to the realization that he is not the favorite of God, that he was not specially created, that the universe was not made for his benefit, and that he is subject to the same laws of nature as all other forms of life, then, and not until then, will he understand that he must rely upon himself and himself alone for whatever benefits he is to enjoy, and devote his time and energies to helping himself and his fellow men to meet the exigencies of life and to set about to solve the difficult and intricate problems of living. The recognition of a problem is the first step to its solution. We are not fallen angels, nor were we created perfect. On the contrary, we are the product of millions of years of an unpurposed evolution. We are the descendants and inheritors of all the defects of our primitive ancestry, the evolution of the myriad forms of life from the infinitesimal to the mammoth, from the worm to the dinosaur. The most important step in the development of man is the recognition of the fact that we are born without knowledge and that the acquisition of knowledge is a slow and painful process. If all man needed upon earth was a knowledge of God, then why the necessity of establishing educational institutions? Unless a child is taught to talk, it will never be able to speak the language of our tongue. Without teaching the child the rudiments of speech, he would be unable to communicate his thoughts to others. Without proper training, his grunts of expression would be meaningless, and the only way he could express himself would be by the primitive instinct of making signs and by pointing. The brain needs the same kind of training as any other part of the body that requires exercise for development. Nourishment for the mind is just as necessary as nourishment for the body. Just as there are some foods which have been so adulterated and refined that when eaten, they add no nourishment to the body, so there are truths which have been adulterated by religion and superstition so as to be utterly valueless in nourishing the mind with intelligence. Education becomes the primary object of civilization. As Thomas Paine says, wisdom is not the purchase of a day. The church knows that an educated man is an unbeliever. That is why there is a continual struggle on the part of the clergy to adulterate education with superstition. To maintain their untenable position, they must keep the people shackled to a form of mental slavery. Both fear and superstition are forms of a contagious disease. The ignorance of man produced natural fears and the elements of nature. What he could not understand, he attributed to malevolent spirits whose primary purpose was to punish and harm him. Under this spell, it seems almost incredible that he ever advanced from a state of primitive ignorance. His fears produced such fantastic monsters of the air that it was first necessary to relieve his tormented mind of these terrifying myths of ghosts and gods before he was able to acquire even the simplest rudiments of knowledge. Man's ignorance and fears made him an easy prey of priests. His gullibility was such that he believed everything he was told. He soon became a slave to these liars and hypocrites. And what did the priests tell him? They told him that God had made a special revelation in a book called the Bible, and that it was necessary to believe every word in that book in order that he might save his soul. They told him that if he disobeyed their commands, he would suffer eternal damnation in a hell where the fire never ceases and where the worm never dies. They also told him that it was a sin for him to read that book and that the priest was especially ordained by God to interpret the meaning of each and every word. And what was the priest's interpretation of the text of that book? It was that man was a corrupt and sinful being and that in order to be saved from punishment after death, he had to give a substantial part of the fruits of his labor to the priest to pray for him and intercede with God on his behalf so as to mitigate the punishment to which he had already been doomed. What a diabolical scheme of fraud by which to have upon the sweat and labor of others. It was such a profitable scheme that the priests began to maintain their power by the force of arms. And from here, I shall continue in the next episode again. Thank you.
For more videos, please subscribe to our Positive Atheism English Channel presented by Samaram channels, which has crossed more than 20 crore views. Please like, subscribe and share our videos, and for notification of our new videos, please click the bell icon.